Hello, everybody. I'm going to just do a little talk and hopefully I'll teach something, cover a couple of things. Today, a little bit update with my friends. Today, I was with my friend Albert. Now, Albert, I've talked about, and he's been on a few of the videos, the last few that I have made. And I mentioned, and it's still on my mind somewhat, because I guess the incident I had with Albert, I might have been a little worse than I maybe made it sound in the beginning. Albert is a good friend of mine for many years, and then I'll tell some of the story about today. But Albert, he's been in prison. He's been shot and stabbed. Today he was showing me, as whoever was there, the gunshot wounds and stab wounds, and Albert had a life that was that road. But his mom had told him about the Lord when he was a young boy, as well as his other brothers and all. And I knew his other brothers. His name, one of the brothers was Lazarus, another one is Sam. And Lazarus I knew Lazarus, he was a friend of mine. That was his actual name. And Lazarus just died recently. Then his other brother Sam died recently, and then his mother just died. So I kept that into account to realizing that a lot has happened with my friend. But today, the part that I would say probably was a little worse, Albert had grabbed me one day and he was like wanting to fight people because you take into account all these things that I just mentioned to you. But that day he was a little worse, so I mentioned I had grabbed Albert, which I did, but it was a response, just like not planned. But I grabbed Albert by the neck with my left hand, and then I pinned Albert to the ground. Now, I wasn't choking him, but I had him on the ground around his neck. But I didn't punch him, and I just slapped him. So it was a reflex action for me, meaning you don't, if you have maybe an anger problem or you've had violence in your past, okay, so you understand those types of things. And so I think some of my other friends then heard about it, and they wondered today, because Albert came up, he had his guitar and he had a Christian book with him, and Albert's very outspoken, talks a lot, but me and Albert had that settled, what happened with me and Albert. And some of the others might not have known that yet. So they were kind of like watching, because Albert's just a type that's normally very loud, and he does touch you and all. But today, and I know Albert's past, and as he was really preaching today, he was quoting all types of verse. Brother John, we're not supposed to be complaining. God doesn't like it when we're grumbling, and God convicted me, John, because I've been complaining. I said, that's right, Albert. And then the book, he wanted me to look at a chapter in a Christian book. I think he got it when he was in prison years ago. And they were all good scriptures, the promises of God. So it was really Albert loudly testifying, but he was quoting scriptures, but it was all very real, because I know Albert for many years. And it's a good insight, because I do understand that many of us in the normal Christian church world, when we look at the people that are out there, we don't always recognize that God has been in work in many of their lives, even throughout their lives, even though many of them are on the street, many of them are homeless. And it was a good testimony for Albert to just be quoting those verses. And he said, John, the devil, and he started crying at the end, Albert. He's a very passionate person. He said, the devil's trying to tell me, John, I will not fulfill my destiny, because I'm now 52, John. I'm 57, Albert's 52. And his family just passed away. And I said, yes, it's a lie of the devil, Albert. And I try to, and I say, I see gifts, and I don't make that up. I say, I see you guys as gifted. I see you guys have many. You're intelligent, you're gifted. And if you heard all the scriptures Albert was quoting, you would have seen that. And I just agreed with him as he was saying, we resist the devil and he will flee from you. Draw near unto God, he will draw near unto you. And look, Albert confess a lot of his past, a lot of things that happened in his life. And yet, he's seeking God in the best way he can. So that was on my mind. I wanted to mention that. being I have not spoken much at all in the last few weeks, a friend of mine, a couple of other people I mentioned before, and I don't think you've ever seen them on video. Her name is Denise, and the husband or boyfriend's name is Travis. And I mentioned them before because one day I had like a little incident with Travis. It wasn't that bad, but then he was sick, like he was going to die. He has one lung because he was stabbed in prison and lost a lung. But I remember I laid hands on him that day and prayed for him. He got better, and every time he sees me, Pastor John, very nice friend of mine, Travis. But his wife, Denise, she's had some experiences that are in the supernatural things that are going on in the area we live. When you have a lot of drug use, a lot of meth use, there's a lot of demonic activity that goes on that many of my friends recognize. And last week, I think Denise wanted me to do the video right then to talk about it, but I think she felt bad. I didn't, but I just wasn't doing a video right then. But she had her phone in her pocket, and she said, "Oh, Pastor John, I was going to even try and call you last night because Crow has my phone number. They're all friends." But Crow probably says John never gets his phone, which I don't. But what she wanted to show me was a strange experience. She was at the park walking like from the restroom back to an area where they hang out, where you've seen me in the past at that park. And her phone by itself in her pocket had turned on and went to the record mode. Now, this has never happened to her before. And she didn't realize her phone was recording something. And as she was walking, she got back to the rock. And then when she took her phone out of the pocket, it turned off immediately, whatever it was recording. But then she looked at, not realizing how did that happen. And it certainly looked like a demonic thing was right behind her. It was and when they saw that video, that's why they had freaked out. And everybody that watched that video, I watched it, and she was wanting me to watch it. And I saw something right at the end that looked like a demonic thing. Now, we're not here to glorify that aspect of things. But she said, "John, you can't see it through the whole video?" I said, "No, I don't." Because everyone else could see that entity through the whole video. And I only saw it right before the end of the video, right when it was going to shut off. And then you hear it, it's like a motorcycle going down the road, but the sounds, it almost looked like it came from one of these horror movie type things. So I wanted to mention that, and I did pray like a deliverance thing for our friends. And we have power over all the power of the enemy. Jesus said, "Nothing shall by any means hurt you." And the casting out of demons and the binding of spirits and all, we have authority for that. Jesus said to Peter, "I give unto you the keys of the kingdom. Whatever you bind on earth is bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth is loose in heaven." Now, we talk a lot. Different churches have views on the keys. But I find it interesting that as I'm reading again through Acts, Peter, he opened up the door of the gospel to the Jews, the great preaching, Acts 2 and 3, and to the Gentiles, which is Acts chapter 10, the house of Cornelius. So in a manner, Peter had those keys that the Lord graced him to open up that gospel of the kingdom to Jew and Gentile. Now we understand that Paul was the apostle of the Gentiles. That was his calling. And Peter really had the ministry to the Jewish people. But those keys do indeed represent things. And I wanted to mention that for my Protestant friends. Because though we have different interpretations, when Peter made the great confession, Jesus said, "Who do men say that I am?" Some say you're John the Baptist or this one or that one, this prophet. "But who do you say that I am?" Jesus said to his disciples. Peter said, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of God, the Son of the Blessed." And Peter would say Jesus would say to Peter, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed this to thee, but my Father which is in heaven." So he got it, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Now, part of that aspect, upon this rock, is referring to the confession of Peter, but it is speaking to Peter. So I want you to see that confession that Peter made, that Jesus is the Christ, that is, if you will, the rock that the church is built on. All who confess that Jesus is the Christ are part of this habitation this church, this community. And it transcends all denominations and all ages, okay? And in the debates we have in the field of scholarly stuff and all, a lot of times the debates do trend around the historic aspect of the church, the older churches, and tracing roots back to the first, second century and all. And all of that is okay, but to understand that God had ordained it in such a way that everyone that confesses that Jesus is the Christ is born of God and is part of this spiritual community. And so we're not so much looking at what earthly institution is the right one, but every church or every earthly institution that's a denomination that confesses that Jesus is Christ, we're all part of that church. So I take a broad view of unity, and I don't argue. I know the arguments, but I don't argue for one particular historical tracing to who was Peter, then passing these keys on to, all right? I understand these are good arguments that scholars have made, but I wanted to just mention those few things. Okay, I got something about Daniel there. Oh, let me mention this. I remember it now. I have friends of mine, so I can't always give names of all my friends. But you've seen most of my friends on these videos. And one day, one of my friends, a lot of them have done prison time for various things. Some of my friends have murdered and killed people, all right? And that's been part of their lives. Some had others tried to kill them, and they have tried to kill others in the life that goes on in violence and the things of the world. But a friend of mine shared some experiences one day with me about his history of, Brother John, he said, I had to realize that all that happened to me, when I found the Lord in prison, the Lord began showing me that if certain things didn't happen to me, I would have never found the Lord, because this friend got saved in prison, like some of my other friends. And he said, and sometimes when I have a tendency living with the after effects of being a felon, being out here, certain requirements people have to meet when they're out back in society, he said, sometimes I forget that God had showed me at one time many of these things that happened. I quoted this today to Albert, that Albert brought up the story of Joseph in the book of Genesis, and Albert looking in the scripture, and he said, look what happened to Joseph, John. He was accused of rape, and he was innocent, and so forth. I said, the best verse out of the story of Joseph in Genesis, Joseph says to his brothers, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. What you meant for evil in the story of Joseph being accused, being falsely imprisoned and all, sold by his brothers into slavery, most of you should know the story. But Joseph said, the things that happened to me, people did intend evil, but God meant it for good. So as I'm talking to this other friend of mine, who he says, sometimes I have to remind myself, John, which is another verse, I quoted Albert today, David had to encourage himself in the Lord, because others wouldn't do it. David said, I'll encourage myself in the Lord. And as my friend was sharing his experience about what happened to him and how later he began to see that it was a benefit, but other people couldn't really see it. He knows it because the Lord showed him these things. And I said, the next day or two, I said, brother, when you were sharing that, I wanted to give you some insights from the prophet Daniel. I said, and it might be Daniel 10, it might be Daniel 12, maybe both of those chapters combined. I said, but at one time God shows these things to Daniel. And then God says to Daniel, but the time appointed is going to be long. And the men that are with you shall not see these things, but you will see them. And no man will stand with you in this, save Michael the archangel. Now, most of the prophecy students are familiar with these verses. I said, but what God was telling Daniel was, there are certain things that I'm showing you. And the other people around you are not going to, not that they're bad people or anything, but they're not going to tap into the things that I'm showing you. And my friend listened very intently, because I was applying it, and I felt the Lord told me even the day before, tell your friend about that experience of Daniel. Now, he knew the chapter. He was even quoting some of those verses. But as I sat there and said, remember that now. There are things God showed you, my friend, that others are not going to see. The people around you are not going to see. And some of these things are long-term things. And I could see in his eyes, he said, man, that was good. Because that was the word of the Lord to him for that particular moment, just to bring him back to the experiences and things God had already showed him, and he was forgetting. So that was one I wanted to mention. Let me look, and I'm not sure how much more I'll talk here. Austin's verse, and then Sparta. Okay? These are the notes I wrote the last few weeks. The other day, the only scripture I had was my friend Austin. He goes by the nickname of Trouble. You've seen him on my videos before. When he was just in jail this last year, I wrote Austin. He wrote me from jail. He asked if I'd write him, and I did. I made that commitment, but those were the old days, and I found it difficult to set aside time to write again. I used to write a lot of brothers in prison over the years. But he had that one verse, which out of all my friends that day, he was bringing it up, but he's having struggles. And I mentioned it the other day, the wineskins. You can't put new wine into old bottles, because if you put new wine into old wineskins, when the new wine begins to ferment, it breaks those wineskins. Okay, sort of like a leather canvas type image of what do they call it? You know, the little bag that you could put liquor or alcohol or water in. And so, in the days of Christ, if you're going to use those types of wineskins, and you put them in, if you put the new wine into the old ones, they've lost their elasticity. Then as the fermenting process begins to take place, it'll break them, because those old wineskins are not made for new wine. And the main teaching on that is the covenant. The old mindset and the old law, Jesus was referring that to the mindset of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Said, look, there's going to be a change in the covenant, which indeed there was. And so they couldn't embrace this new born-again thing, except a man be born of the Spirit cannot see this kingdom. And so there had to be a change. But that's the one verse my friend Austin brought up. And that night I only read one chapter in order. Now I'm reading one chapter of Acts, one of Mark, one of Ezekiel. Not reading two tonight now. I got down to one. And then maybe mixing this. But the one chapter, I guess it was Mark 3. That verse that night was in that chapter. I just find that interesting how a lot of the things my friends speak are coordinated in that manner. Let's see. Austin's verse, I mentioned that. I got a few names. I won't read them because if I gave you the names, it's just from my memory. I've had like an interesting experience the last week or so. It's happened before. But some very prominent national ministries that many of you, most of you would know if I gave you the names. Some of them have like friended me on some of my other social media sites, different ones, from their own personal accounts, which oftentimes you would not get a prominent, minister that's known worldwide to personally like join you. These would be like sites that you might go to, somebody that has 20,000 followers and maybe they only have 50 friends or something, because they're maybe internationally known. But I found it interesting that some of those more prominent ministers sent me personal like invitations to just be on their limited friends things. And it's happened before. One even wanted to talk once. And when I saw that through Twitter, I said, told my friend Furman, I said, man, I don't like, in a sense, those are not my circles. But that just happened again yesterday. And I said, this national ministry is somehow found out about us, which is wonderful. And I said, I'm hesitant to like even be parts of friending them. Of course, I don't want to be rude. So I kind of connected with that national minister, which was a blessing. I said, but that's not my thing, Joe. He said, well, brother, maybe the Lord's bringing them, because you told on some of those House of Prayer Den of Thieves. Some of these prominent ministries were known to be like prosperity gospel. So I just mention that because I really see what you see with me and my friends, and there's no organization to us. I mean, I hope you understand that. I try to make that plain. It's just me and my homeless friends. Okay, there's no income for this ministry. I take no money. I take no offerings. There's no secretaries or anything of that nature. So when I have to set aside time like this, whether it's 30 minutes or so, okay, that's time in my day that I set aside just to speak. And then these get uploaded by me. These get linked by me. On all those posts, you see all those links? Okay, that's all done in the process. Now, I'm trying not to boast. I'm just saying what you see is it. Me and my homeless friends. And even sometimes when they see me speaking, doing a video, sometimes they would ask a while ago, said, oh, who's this, thing that you're part of, that you're speaking into? I said, well, it's just us. I'm making videos. But they had the sense that there was something, if you will, bigger that was going on. And they thought I was connected to some other international ministry. I said, no, it's just us. I told that friend, it was Caveman. I said, no, brother, it's just us. It's me and you, the homeless friend here, hanging on the street. I said, that's it. That's the organization. And I managed to just post all this stuff and send all of it out. And so that's it, okay? So it's not... Now, let me mention, because I want everything to have some teaching value, and I think those were the main updates. I wrote the word Sparta. The other night I try to watch history, teaching, philosophy, scripture, Bible. I try to watch things like that. Courses, you can get them through Roku, online, and so forth. And I was watching one on Acts, and it's a very good, covers, the whole history, from Acts to the book of Revelation, and the brother who's doing the documentary, you're in the Holy Land, you're in the places, so stuff like that I'm interested in. And then he mentioned something about, which I've taught before, but he brought up Sparta, and he brought up some of the famous wars, which are called the Peloponnesian Wars, and then he brought up a certain victory that the Spartans had over another city-state and all, but he wasn't mentioning Athens and Socrates. Now look, I've taught the philosophy post, and I know I have taught multiple times because I study under, scholarly people. I don't just, it's all proof stuff. And I knew I taught a lot that at the time of Socrates, the philosopher, there was the defeat of the great city-state of Athens, the Greek city-state of Athens, by the Spartans. The Spartans actually defeated the Athenians, and it was a big defeat because the Athenians had a lot more manpower than the Spartans did. And the reason I mentioned that over time was that was part of what caused Athens to turn against Socrates and to bring him to a trial, because they said his Socratic method of questioning everything caused too many questions in the younger population of Athens, and they wanted to blame people. They were like, that was part of what was happening at the time when Socrates was forced put to death to drink the hemlock. Okay, I don't want to confuse what he drank. I'm not teaching Socrates right now. But that's why I would mention Sparta and Athens in 5th century BC. And I've brought that up multiple times, not just talking about Sparta or the Peloponnesian Wars, but mixing it in because it had some history to do with philosophy. But on the show I watched, they didn't mention any of that. And they talked about another war, and I said, oh, and I've made too many videos that I could not track them down, where I've just given you that brief history that I gave again. So if something like that happened and I was totally wrong, I couldn't go and get all those videos, and you see what you see. If a mistake happens, I try to correct it in future videos. But I had it right, and I rarely Google something like that, but I did. I Googled it real quick on the phone, because I said, what was the defeat of Athens at the time of Socrates? Sparta, Peloponnesian. I just say that to say this, we did have it right. But sometimes people do get things wrong. And so everything is not dependent upon one person. That's why you don't, when you're growing as a believer, you're growing in education, knowledge, and things. I have courses that are just from universities. They're not, quote, Christian courses. I ordered those from the great courses. They're all up there. But the ones that I ordered from the scholar by the name R.C. Sproul, who passed away a few years ago, he was a real scholar. So anything I learned going through those, as well as the books I read on church history and so forth. So you try to, you don't let everything be dependent. There were a few like little religious documentaries I watched, and it portrayed the last week, and it portrayed like the Christian church, and it showed some of the more, evangelical churches, maybe in the Bible Belt, and just various ways. And I could see that they were not purposely negative, but you could see it was critical. It was like saying, look at the ignorance of these different Christian churches. But as I watched it, I'd say, these are all my brothers and sisters, the different churches they were showing you. And there were times where you could see the divisions among the churches. Some very strong Pentecostal groups that I was watching, and they have certain aspects, and I'm familiar with it as the documentary played. And I think I know a lot of Christians, they view many of these other groups, because I try to stay in history and I try to stay in, foundational. But I don't see these other groups as like ignorant or anything. I see them as God showed them certain aspects of truth. And maybe they found their identity in their particular denomination or movement to that particular doctrine that their founder, might have focused on. Now, I don't think it's good for Christian groups when they're very, to say to the broad church at large, many of these other Christian groups that we might have disagreements with, you will, but many of them are founded upon sincere, and I'm not saying you can't be deceived, but sincere beliefs of certain scriptures that taken in their context, they're okay. If they focus a lot more on the baptism, the Spirit, than the group you're a part of, or a particular gift of the Spirit, or a particular mode of baptism, I have found that many of them have doctrinal backing for the things that they're doing. Now, it doesn't mean everybody's going to see it all in that same way, but they're sincere believers seeking God and following the kingdom. And so I think the big benefit, I heard a very good scholar mention, a good apologist, mentioned the other night watching a show. He said about the divisions he sees within Christianity as he goes throughout the world doing their international ministry. And he said, but one of the problems they see is all these little groups. Many of them all see themselves as the only true group, which is a problem. And he gave a good, I never heard it before, but he said, when the tide is low, every shrimp has his own pond. I like that. When the tide is low, every shrimp has his own pond. And when we're not really walking in the Spirit, as a community, as a people of God, and the tide is low, we tend to see what's around us, whatever God is doing with our particular church, movement, or thing at that time, and we see it, we're self-absorbed. That's why it's a benefit, I think, to look at the whole broad scope of Christian history, the things that we have learned, how we've come along. Why would, and I'm going to end this, I think I hit just about everything. I might title some of these just teaching, if I think they have teaching value. What would value, for my Christian friends, what value would any, like Socrates, and when I taught that stuff, which I did over the years, we have the philosophers before the time of Christ, and in their thinking and in their philosophies, and people that just study it in a secular college, you'll learn that they were looking for the Logos. They actually used the term Logos, that there would be a Logos, some type of unifying principle. And that's where you get into these different things of philosophy. Is all truth certain elements, or is it dualism, monism, different types of things? But what they were seeking for was the one unifying thing that would bring everything together. And they called it the Logos. And for my friends who study the New Testament, you understand that the New Testament was written in Greek. And when John said in John chapter 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That word in the Greek is Logos. So it's interesting that the Apostle John, the New Testament writers, but John particularly, used that word to describe Christ himself. He is the Word of God. And it was the same term, the Greek word for word, which is Logos, that the philosophers actually were looking for. They used that term in their writings, seeking for the Logos. Now, they didn't understand that that was the Christ. They didn't understand that it would all be tied together at the appearing of Jesus in the first century. But people that just study philosophy on their own and were not familiar with this Christian aspect, that's a witness. It's like, wow. So at the fullness of time, it says in Galatians, when the fullness of time was come, God sent forth his Son, made of a woman, made under the law, to redeem those that were under the law. There was a long time period of history of man that God was preparing things. And predating the Greek philosophers, you had Judaism. One of the criticisms that you will find against Christianity, and I've refuted a lot of them over the years, but they would say, what about these common elements that predate Jesus, meaning you have some types of other religious writings or movements or groups that were before Jesus, like the Logos that I explained. And some say, wait, the other cultures, they wrote a book about the flood, the Epic of Gilgamesh or whatever. And they said, we found some of these other principles before Christ. And the critic says, therefore, Christianity was pretty much like a copy, a fake imitation. Now, we refute that, and I've done it myself many times. But I also try to tell people, but what predated the Greek philosophers was Jewish thinkers, Judaism itself, and the Jewish prophets. I said, so anything that was contained in Judaism and Jewish prophets about Christ, the Messiah, that influenced the Greek thinkers, because the Greek philosophers came after Judaism, after the history of the great wisdom thinkers in Judaism. I said, so you could say the Greeks, if you will, copied those elements from the Jews, which the Jewish Old Testament, the prophets, actually had all types of prophecies about Christ. So that's how we refute it. The Christians in the first century, or John using the word Logos himself, he wasn't just copying something. You could say the Greeks copied it from the Jewish nation prior to them. So there's always ways that we could explain these things. Maybe I'll end with one example I gave. Many years ago, here at the mission, there was a man, and I believe him to be true because I know him now, but he was talking to the homeless guys, and he was bringing up some of these things that refute Christianity. Now, because I study it, I'm familiar with it. And he was telling us, the guys there, much of what I just explained. And he said he taught in the famous university in California, Berkeley. And he taught a course on the Epic of Gilgamesh, some of these other writings and all. And he originally, I found out later, was studying, I think, to be a priest. But he was very strong in the church, was thinking about being a priest when he was younger. And then somehow he caught hold of these various things that tried to, cause you to doubt Christianity. And when he was teaching this course in California, I'm sure there were many kids in the course, and he primarily said, we have other accounts about the flood, about certain things that the Bible records, and we found them in other writings. Now, that is true. The dating of the accounts, it really makes no difference to me, because as he was saying this, he was rejecting Christianity because he was convinced that if you found another account in another religion somewhere, that talked about something the Bible spoke about, the flood particularly, that meant Christianity was fake. It was like a cop. Now I know how to talk about these things, and he probably just thought I was homeless. And I said, well, brother, the way we usually refute that, now he's thinking some homeless man, he thought I was homeless, is going to refute me. And I said, if you had a great event that took place, or a tragic event in society, the example I gave is 9/11. I said, if 9/11 was documented by me, an Italian from New Jersey, and I said, look what happened. The towers came down on this date. There was an attack that took place, and I wrote an Italian paper, being I'm an Italian from New Jersey, and I gave it to all my Italian friends, Italian community, Italian deli. I said, now, if you found that same account, maybe varied in some way, in the Spanish culture, some Spanish paper wrote about it, or maybe in some German paper or whatever, I said, you wouldn't go around saying, John's Italian account is fake, because we found another culture that also reported the same event. I said, so the way we refute that Christianity, people say it's fake because you could find other accounts of the flood in other cultures. I said, the Bible is simply recording history, historical events. And if you found a historical accurate record in another culture about a flood, though there's more I can do, but I'll keep it simple. I said, that wouldn't mean the Bible's fake. Nowhere in the Bible does it say this flood account is only in the Bible and no one else will ever write about it. I said, it just would verify that the account was historically accurate. Now, he never thought of that. And I know that day because he since has told me he got back to the church. And he's come up to Timmins over the years. And he wants to keep talking. And I'm, like I said earlier, sometimes I'm not saying I'm rude, but I am, I guess. Because he'll see that I really don't want to just do I do it with my homeless friend. And he had enough that day, and I tried to tell him once that we're online, but he doesn't do the computer. But that was just one example I could give you. That's how we, try to tell people this thing is not built on intellectualism. But don't swallow that. That was a sincere man who was teaching something that he sincerely believed, and he never looked at it the way I explained it, which is, I'm not unique in that explanation. That's what apologists do. They take what critics have said against Christianity, and many good, well-meaning people have simply openly embraced the views that the critics had, not realizing that the critics are wrong. And this just was a paradigm shift for this professor. It was a way that he just never saw it before. And so I'm grateful that, we have those opportunities. Okay? So today, I don't always have to give the dates. You'll see them when I do Sunday sermons, you'll see the dates. But when I post these on the day I make them, I put a note, made it today, which I will do tonight. When you see a video that says made today, it's this video. I give the dates on the Sunday sermons because I have a lot of them. And if you wouldn't know how to distinguish which Sunday sermon you're watching. So I hope we made the effort to impart something of value. I'm at this stage in history, but there's a lot of news, and I'm a news person, but it's such a vast wasteland. So I'm not commenting on that anymore. I recently put all the links together of my New Jersey, New York City trips, and I added them all together on a page on Blogger, which is Corpus Christi Outreach Ministries, and on WordPress. And I did that, so if you want to just go back and look at some of those videos I made with some of the friends who have died and passed away. Okay? So that's it for today. Please pray for all my friends. And like my friend Albert, really, he was bringing up a lot of good scriptures. And said, John, we got to stop complaining, John. Now, he was not talking to me, but all in general. And he said, and we're going to fulfill our destiny. Don't let the devil put you in a place where you think it's not going to fulfill. But the scripture says, I have finished the work. that you have given me to do. Make sure you have a hold of some of the prophets we were talking about today. Write the vision, make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it will speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, for it's going to come to pass. Have the clear vision ahead of time. It's easy. I could get very busy in things I do. I have not made a new study in a while, and I did Acts and Kings and Samuel and Mark. Some of them were done in New York. Me not even planning it, and on the go all the time. And I often would think, oh, this rate, it's too much for me, in the sense of sort of like I'm got that, And I said, wouldn't it be nice to just rest? That's a difficult thing to learn. To just, rest. But remember, see the vision. Don't just be occupied every day just to be distracted. Okay, there's people that they want to overcome alcoholism or drugs or whatever, which is a big problem in the area that I'm at. And then maybe it helps them to just be busy every day. But if you're just busy every day, not really accomplishing anything, cooking a good meal or whatever it is, at the end of your life, did you fulfill your mission? Okay? Get the vision and determine by seeking God, Father, what do you want me to fulfill with the rest of the days I have left? And when you see what God is showing you, then you organize your busyness, the time around fulfilling that. That's an important thing. There are a lot of people who are busy, functioning, active every day, but there's no real vision. Without a vision, the people perish. So I would encourage you, seek the Lord and say, what can I do that's effective? And once you grasp hold of it, then it's like anything else. Well, a lot of times when I'm uploading videos, I have an old ledger here, and it's this, and I wrote the word dispatch. Why? For 25 years, fire department, go into that job, and then there's times you do radio check every day. This is KBG 633 Kingsville Fire Department, testing radio equipment, but it was a routine thing. Now, how many times did I say that? Radio check. It's radio check. Check the units. Go. That was just constancy, order. It's part of the things you accomplish in life. It's going to be a discipline. It's time to upload. It's time to teach. It's time to do outreach. It's time to pray. The prayer things. What's encouraged me to stay faithful to the other things? I can't miss my prayer times. And the prayer times are hours throughout the week. And there are set times of hours. And I always, if other things are kind of not going right, I'm like, man, I can't miss the prayer time. Same thing with scripture reading. And then I thought, when you add these other things in, teaching, uploading, writing, whatever, you already got the discipline down. Jesus said, could you not pray with me for an hour? He said that to his men, okay? Could you not pray? Could you not set aside an hour daily to fulfill whatever greater calling there is that you could be fulfilling, utilizing these tools that you see me speaking? The vast wasteland of social media. And bless everybody that's trying to communicate something of value. But you can do the same. You can do the same, all right? So I'll end it with that. Father, I pray a blessing on all of our friends as this video goes out tonight, as well as in the future, that you would encourage all of them. Use them. Let your doctrine drop down like rain. Let your speech distill like dew, that everyone would receive of these words. Enlarge the place of this tent. Let them stretch forth the curtains of these habitations. Spare not. Lengthen these cords and strengthen these stakes. For I'll break forth on the right hand and on the left. Your seed will inherit the Gentiles and make desolate cities to be inhabited. Pour out your spirit on our seed. Pour out your blessings on our offspring. Let them be like fountains dispersed abroad, like rivers of waters in the streets. Amen.